Daneil Marosi is a multidisciplinary artist and designer whose practice bridges text, spirituality, and visual culture. Originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and now based in South Florida, Marosi uses experimental mark making, dripping, scraping, and fabricating letter forms to create layered compositions that combine sacred scripture with contemporary cultural language. His work explores the transformative potential of words and symbols, particularly their ability to shape behavior and belief. Marosi's ongoing Rhema Word Series investigates the convergence of biblical wisdom, advertising, and pop culture, elevating everyday signage and familiar iconography into meditative visual experiences. Marosi holds an MFA from Florida International University and teaches at FIU's College of Communication, Architecture, and the Arts. His installations and exhibitions have been featured at the Frost Art Museum, Vizcaya Museum and Gardens, Fort Lauderdale-Hollywood International Airport, and internationally internationally at art fairs in New York, London, and Miami. He is a resident artist at Studio 18 Art Complex in Pembroke Pines. Deeply informed by faith, family, and community, Morosi continues to mine the spiritual and aesthetic dimensions of language to bring attention to the unseen forces that shape contemporary life. Great, Morosi. Daniel, thank you so. I appreciate it for being here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to interview me.
So, with that being said, I want to jump into our first question, which is your work often blends biblical scripture with modern signage. What inspired you to start merging these different forms together of communication together?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked. This is kind of an ongoing exploration of scripture, which I'm always examining, but also the way that words are used to either uplift or tear down. This is kind of a something that I discovered being a parent. I have I have two daughters and a stepdaughter, and I realized that sometimes the words that I expressed were when especially when they're negative, I had to consider where are these words coming from? Where do these ideas come from? And in the process of um, discovering or searching for the roots of sometimes negative thinking or kind of incorrect logic sometimes against myself, that I realized that the words in Scripture were reflecting a way of living and a way of thinking that was that could conquer those kind of negative influences that maybe came from childhood or wherever. And so as a parent, I felt like a sign, like I was holding signs, to point the direction. This is the way, if in order to be healthy, you can think this way, you can say these kind of things, and you will actually have a way of thinking that is that will lead you in the right path. And so, in just kind of interpreting that line of thinking, I developed signs, and these signs were part of a phenomenon that was happening around me. Also, we see these affirmations or motivational kind of um, posters and framed pictures and so on in people's homes. We see them on t-shirts, and it really fascinated me. I felt like this phenomenon was something that I wanted to explore for myself. So the signs of life, the signs became a way of a way for me to express this exploration.
Great, thank you. So it was from early on where you wanted to merge these two ideas together, which is I want to also kind of touch upon maybe your background in design and art direction. How has
Mhm.
that influenced your studio practice today?
Yeah, so I worked as an art director for many, many years in television and in print, and working with designers. with other designers, whether they're 3D animators or typographers, printers, and fabricators working in set design. Um, I got to uh, I got to get in the habit of collaborating with other people and also being able to share ideas and develop ideas so that I'm not working in a vacuum. When it came to specifically graphic design, the combination of text and image is always a component that we're going to encounter with any kind of advertising or graphic design, and that complementary relationship between type and image or text image um, has always been part of what I do, and so I wanted to bring that also into my work, that my personal work.
Great. I think that graphic design has evolved for so many years, like since a couple years back. I remember I took a graphic design class and that um, I was sitting with other students and they kind of told me that graphic design has changed so much throughout the years because of technology.
Hmm.
It really makes it that much profound and it's all around us. How, even if in the most kind of unusual way, which is really interesting. And I want to talk about your series, the Rhema Word Series, which
Hmm.
combines spirituality and contemporary culture. How do you select which words or phrases to highlight or represent?
The rhema is a Greek word that is about divinely inspired words. Um, as far as the like how they resonate and how they actually turn into something that I want to use. I kind of use Ed Ruscha's way of thinking, that he would collect words and phrases, and he would say, is when they became hot, then he would use them in his work. And I felt that that was a great way of thinking about these Rhema words, because occasionally a phrase that I might have read, or verse, let's say 2 years ago, didn't really, just kind of pass by, and all of a sudden it has this meaning for me at this point in time in my life, and I want to save that and use that in some way. So I would collect uh, dozens and dozens, hundreds of phrases, and review them occasionally and just see what works, or what actually resonates with me, and I would use that in my work. Um, and usually, especially I'd say mostly in the paintings, more than the fabricated and sculptural work.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, absolutely. I think that words can have a great impact, like you're saying, upon one's uh, personal, experience of the world, and that makes it that um, much more fruitful for others to, I think, really resonate with those, whatever it is that's being said. So I think that we're as human beings, I think we all can sort of relate in such a intimate kind of experience because we all, to some extent, sort of experience reality in some way similarly to one another. So that's really profound in unusual because, and I think I was talking to someone about this, not to derail this conversation, but
It's fine.
how how individuals become sort of not entangled but linked with one another through these personal experience because oftentimes people think that the Ilmi it's like a singular experience, but it's something that a lot of people go through. And I'm just kind of talking abstractly, but
Yeah,
people's, you know, with that in different ways. But um,
it's
so
something.
yeah,
Yeah,
go.
actually, just to touch on that, the here at Studio 18, we sometimes have those discussions about when our work is so personal, we feel it might be so personal that people might not be relating or might not relate to it. But we have found, and as artists, sometimes the most personal and the most authentic kind of expression is actually becomes more universal in a way that even if somebody can't relate to your specific experience, they can relate to the idea of feeling the feelings that you're expressing, whether it's feelings of insecurity or being wounded or in your heart or the emotional aspects that are generally universal.
Yeah, exactly. And so, um, you talked about mentorship a little bit, just about even though the mentorship kind of conveys like a hierarchy, but you know, I think that it's important to understand that it's just seeing how others relate to your work, and I want to know a little bit more about how working with mentors like Michiko Itatani play in your early development as an artist?
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Itatani's work is very different from mine. It has a lot of fantastical elements and so on. If you don't, if you're not familiar with her, she's a Chicago artist, and she did a workshop in Maine that I attended. It was like a 2-week workshop at Haystack School, and it was very revealing because she was probably one of the first people um, to really show how contemporary art um, can be very effective as a tool of communication, as a way of um, joining us together, like we were just talking about, but also developing conversations around common human experiences, and uh, sometimes artwork acts as like a platform or an artifact to begin a communication. And I think that's very important as an artist, that whatever we're expressing and we're sharing with other people, that there is that sense of we don't even really have ownership of it. We're kind of giving it out to the world in order for a conversation to happen about a particular topic. So in my case, I would like people to talk about what the meaning is behind biblical proverbs, and what's actually true, thousands of years ago and today, and how if the scripture is something relevant, or if it's something that maybe doesn't have relevance. We want to be able to talk about that in a free way with some level of intelligence and maybe skepticism even, but also being open um, to to seeing the artwork as a doorway, as a entry point for this kind of communication.
Yeah, that's really interesting to consider, especially when you have ideas like faith and
Mhm.
how does that particularly shape, how does that shape your artistic vision and goals and when you're working in your studio or maybe teaching as well? How does that play a role into your practice?
Yeah, so I just read a quote. Was it Michael Heiser that he said, as an artist without spirituality, it's just our work is just nothing. And I think there's something to be said, whether whatever faith you have, there's a spirit of the thing, of the human spirit, but also what I believe is that we're made in the image of God, and so that divine spirit, that sort of heavenly, eternal aspect to who we are, actually what comes through in the work. So when I'm doing, especially text work, I might paint some phrases on a canvas, and I know I'm not the first to do this, but I maybe write or paint things onto the canvas, and then through the process of working and using different paints and colors and so on, those words get covered up, but the intentionality, the intention of that spirit of whatever those words were. I believe is still there, and it resonates or it comes through the work, whether you see it or not. But there's a sense of feeling that, whether it's something pleasant and uplifting, or whether it's something dark or disturbing, or whatever is in between that. But I believe that spirituality is in the artwork, whether we whether we intend it or not. But when we do and put the intention in it, it comes through.
Yeah, especially now more so than ever. But I want to also kind of touch upon your another project that you've been working on, Signs of Life, and how those how you talked about how when you're painting your words, some of the words get covered, but the intention's still there. And it seems like in this project, it's slightly a little bit different because not only are they living in public spaces, and I mean the pieces that you're making for this project, but there's no particular like layers like you would layering, I guess it would be the right word, that you do in painting. So I want to know what are some responses that you have observed from passers-by or your response to this new way of working, or maybe you have worked in this kind of method before. I just want to know a little bit about if you could reflect on that just for now.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Signs of Life are they're commissioned projects. There's a series in Miami Shores, and there's another series in Pembroke Pines in Ben Bernardino Park. So the signs actually, like as you said, they're a lot more direct than my paintings that sometimes might distort or hide sort of words within paint strokes. You can see kind of one that's being worked on back here. But the signs of life are as I was thinking about signs, signs are always when we see road signs, they're a warning of the future. So if you see, a stop sign, or you see, whatever kind of sign is ahead of you, it's a little warning of the future. And you can signs will have no they have no power to enforce any kind of law, but they do give you that opportunity to stop or turn or whatever it is that you're, especially on the road, where you need to where your safety is and your well-being is of importance. So the signs of life, they are actually in the shape. These are phrases that are uplifting phrases. They're meant to be uplifting. They're on. They're in the shape of typical road signs. And the text is actually punched through the road sign. So when you see the signs, you see the words, but you also see into the distance. And um, the signs are generally, I would say they're kind of a mix of they're based in some scriptural um, passages, but some of them are just general phrases that we use in affirmations or motivational phrases. I'm just thinking of one that, like in Pembroke Pines, there's one that says gratitude is always free. And this is, it's just a simple sign that's in a park. But, uh, as you're going, the idea that these signs are positioned in a place where you don't really expect them. A sign usually is, like I said, telling of a warning or something like that, warning of the future. But these are placed in a park where you are walking, or biking, and you come across something that says gratitude is always free. But for some people, or for if you're walking by, it may not impact you or anything. It may not have much to do with your life. But for somebody that maybe that's dealing with something that that is oppressive in their lives or something like that, that phrase might just strike them as something they need to see or need to feel. So that by positioning these signs in places where they're a little bit unexpected, they're not in places where you would expect to, or if you do expect to see a sign, it's not a sign that would tell you something uplifting. And I want that kind of surprise and um, that sort of unexpected encounters that help you feel better. I like that possibility, and that's really what the signs of life. That's what they're all about.
Yeah. I see that, the way that I kind of picture it also too is these, like you were talking about how you can see these signs and you might disregard them, but they become, I think, still very valuable in that respect because whether you find a sign and it resonates deeply with you or maybe it doesn't, I think there's still value there within, you might memory might sort of kind of you can think about it later on and it becomes like this sort of moment of where you connect the dots. I don't know if
Mhm.
that makes much sense, but I think that the
Yeah.
idea that I'm trying to throw out there is like the fact that objects, for example, can also, or numbers, I think more so than ever, like numbers kind of can become indicative too of what um, seems to be the case with your project Signs of Life. Um, and you also teach, and along with your artistic practice, and I'm sure they kind of come together in various ways. How do you balance the academic work with your creative pursuits?
It's actually fairly simple. I mean, I spend more time in my studio than I am teaching. I teach at the university level, but I also I like to do workshops with the general public, the community. I've done some workshops at Frank Gallery and at Studio 18 here, where I'm an artist. And those are opportunities to see. Sometimes people need a little bit of sort of a guidance when it comes to creative pursuits, and maybe a little bit of somebody to let them know you can be free in this space to do whatever you like, and that's sometimes a little bit overwhelming for somebody who maybe is not an artist or that seems a little bit like that's we need some kind of boundaries, and so I kind of help facilitate an environment that people can explore ideas, feel free to make mistakes, especially, and to do something that maybe is out of their routine, but that could become part of a routine. So I know like sketching for me is a very natural kind of activity. I always have a sketchbook around. And as I mentioned, my youngest, has no problem just picking up a pen and paper and starting to draw. And I know that I've seen from my experience in teaching that around the time that kids get around, let's say, middle school, they start to self-censor and they're comparing themselves with other kids and sort of expecting more from their abilities or expecting something different, I guess. And I realized that point of life is the point where, for me personally, I kind of saw enough of my skill to keep going, and I'm sure many artists would say the same thing. They can draw, or they can do something that whatever anybody says about it, they have that strong sense of power over that ability. For other kids, a single phrase from a teacher, from a sibling or a parent, kind of criticizing might just kind of end their creative pursuits. And unfortunately, I see that happening around middle school when kids are kind of maybe becoming a little more self-conscious. So that age group, I'm always interested, especially that age group, middle school and high school, where I get a chance to let them do what they really like. Let's say let them play, because I know, as an adult, giving yourself time to play, to actually just do something that's not productive, let's say, or not practical or logical, let's say. We tend to veer away from that because we don't want to. We don't we see it maybe as a waste of time, and as an artist, I recognize that those moments. are actually um, they're pivotal. They're essential for helping us to identify who we are and give us a purpose that's more than just, let's say, paying bills and doing laundry or something like that, adult things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and you touched upon how I think an important kind of a moment of realization when you are able to reflect on what you're doing from others, like from whether it's feedback or whether it's not. I think it's really important to kind of have an understanding of the world around you and how people are responding to what you're doing. And in that respect, as it concerns that, I want to know what the your perspective on the role of text in art as it has evolved in your practice since graduate studies. How has that changed? Has that changed, or is that still somewhat the same?
Yeah, I would say when I finished grad school, I kind of took a break. I was working as a set designer. I had my own design studio, and mainly focusing on commercial work. But um, after a little while, let's say a year or so, I pivoted back to what I was doing in grad school with text. Um, and as far as the evolution of what I was doing, um, I feel sometimes that when text is appropriate in my work, I will bring it in, um, and sometimes I'm not even sure how to combine or how to bring the text into the work, and I never want to force it. I just recently done a project on Fort Lauderdale Beach at sunrise, actually, with an ice sculptor, and it was funded by the Broward Cultural Division. I received an innovation grant to create these ice sculptures presented on the beach, and they were everyday objects like a phone receiver or a salt shaker or various things, and they all had words that were related to time in the future. So one said eternal, one said infinite, and legacy was another one. And gradually over the course of the morning, really, because they melted um, that particular day because of wind and everything, it took them about four hours to kind of melt into lumps, unrecognizable. But that process, that project was something that I introduced text in a very purposeful way, and that's really what with whatever I'm doing, whether it's manufactured signs that appear, in public um, or paintings. In this case, it was ice sculptures, so it was more of like an event. The text has to have some purpose that is not just sort of personal, idiosyncratic writing, but something that somebody can read and understand and possibly project their own ideas and emotions into, so that the meaning is personal for the audience in different ways, and not necessarily so directed by me. Kind of create a situation where a person can interact in any way they like.
Yeah, so it seems like it's maybe more open-ended in that respect, but
Yeah.
I want to also kind of ask you this one last question about what do you hope people kind of get from your work after viewing your your work? Do you aim for comfort, to challenge people, or to confront individuals in some respect or another? Yeah, so and I guess this is a two-part question. And then since this is the last, I guess, question, I want to know what else you talk. I think you just uh, if you can talk about any future projects coming up or whatnot, that'll be great as well. But
Yeah. No, like as far as audience, it's funny. it's a question that sometimes I don't think about audience necessarily until there's an exhibition. I think, how is this going to be received and that kind of thing. I mean, of course, sometimes as I'm working, I'm thinking, is this, uh, what am I doing? And how could this possibly be received, in some way? It's not always that important to me, but I know that my work as a graphic designer, um, and as a set designer and just as a designer in general, when I'm working with when I'm designing something that is intended for people to interact with, it is really, really important for me to consider what is the purpose of this composition, this color, this particular typeface, and that kind of thing. That audience reaction is really, really important in design. It's so targeted and specific. Of course, in my work, my studio work, my art practice, ambiguity I welcome it much more readily. So sometimes people respond. Sometimes they really get it. They talk about the situation maybe that they're in. I've gotten excellent responses from the Signs of Life and also some other exhibitions where people are willing to talk about their experience with faith or with a church or whatever, their childhood and so on, the wounds that they received. And I think that's amazing that an artwork can do that. Um, I was going to say, my projects that are now kind of turning more public than mainly exhibition work. I was commissioned to design this very large Art Deco bench for the Underline Park in Miami, and that'll be going in 2026. But that is another example where I was able to design something with a specific style. Um, it was Art Deco style because the sponsor was Bernard Wolfson, or actually Jessie Wolfson. Her late husband was an Art Deco enthusiast to like the nth degree, and so they wanted some sort of tribute to Bernard Wolfson, and so there was a competition and everything, and I was so happy to see the response from Jessie Wolfson that the bench, it could be just a bench, where people sit, but it actually is very important to me that the the lines, the symbols that are, and every part of it, that even the curvature of the bench draws people in, that there's something maybe special about it. And um and so that project actually is a very public, design project. um, and there's another project that I'm doing. I'm working with the city of Opa-locka to redesign their bus shelters and so on and crosswalks and so on to complement the already existing sort of Arabian design that started back in 1926, and 100 years later we're now uh, really creating a more of a identity for that city. So I'm working with these public entities, the city of Miami and city of Opa-locka and so on, and I really enjoy that. It's amazing for me to have that kind of opportunity to do something that is very people oriented.
Great. Well, great. Thank you so much, Daniel, for being. That's all the time we have left, and I really appreciate carving some time out to sit down and talk.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Zed. I appreciate it so much.